welcome to my website. This is going to be the first in what I hope will be a bunch of webinars. Depending on how this turns out and if I'm able to edit it properly and make it so it's not a disaster, we will keep going. I want to do a series of beginners lectures in writing, and this will be the first of the beginner section, and this one's on writing the short story. A lot of beginners start with short stories just because novels seem a little too much of a learning curve, but the fact is it takes a different talent to write a good short story than it does to write a novel. So not everything that you learn from writing short stories is transferable to the novel, but a lot of the same concepts are. So it's probably more reasonable to start with short stories and then work your way up to longer short stories, novellas, and then into novels. Compare a novel to a marathon, compare a short story to a short hike. Except they're different. They're different animals. Compare it to a marathon, and then compare it to a short a hike where you've got to wear spiky boots and maybe jump up and down and have things in your head that spin. I don't know. They are different animals. They do require a different set of talents. Some people can write amazing short stories. People like Neil Gaiman, Jeffrey Deaver. I can't think of the other ones on the tip of my tongue, but that doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is go over the 7-point plot outline for genre short stories. Now, don't get afraid of the word genre, because pretty much every story has a genre. Even if you're just writing literary fiction, your genre is literary fiction. I found that out the hard way when they classified my books as literary mystery, and I had no idea what that meant. I asked at a writing conference, and someone put up their hand and said, it usually means it's very boring, which wasn't what I wanted to hear. I don't think my books are boring, but maybe some people do. Maybe the people who classify it as literary think it's boring. So anyway, this 7-point outline for genre short stories I'm going to give you originally came from a workshop by Kristine, Kathryn, Rusch, and Dean Wesley Smith. Kristine is my mentor, and I've been down in Oregon to their house many times, and they've taken me under their wing and taught me a lot of what I know today in writing. I owe a lot to them. And this lecture was also based on a series of workshops by Damon Knight. I've never met Damon Knight, but I've heard the name come up so many times. I'm going to post the outline to the board in a minute so you'll be able to just see. You can go along and listen to me. I won't say I'm going to throw it up, because that would be the wrong terminology to use. It just gives it a gross connotation. It's going to be placed up on the video screen in a minute. So this outline is the most concise way that they found to give writers a clue on what makes a story. Too often, beginning writers come up with 11... Come on with glasses on. It's a lot easier with my glasses on. I just look like a nerd. Too often beginner writers come up with a clever dialogue or a character study or a mood piece. Those have their place as part of a good story, but are usually not a story by themselves. So if you're basically just writing about something and not writing from within the person or from within that person's point of view, you can end up with something like that, and it's not going to fly. Lest you feel constricted by this advice, please note, start by writing your story as your muse moves you. My muse happens to be a crack whore who's never home, but that's okay. Yours probably isn't. Just let it flow. This outline is more of a guide on story structure and should be used to analyze and diagnose problems after your story is finished. So for your first draft, you want to not think about this. You want to read through this so you know it, and if you can commit it to memory, that's great. But when you write, you're going to use the right side of your brain. But if you're lucky, you've looked at this enough, the left side of your brain has picked it up and is automatically going to be implementing it for you, even though you're not writing, using it, and consciously thinking about it. Writing is very much a game of tricking the right side of your brain into just going for it, while shutting down the left side of your brain so your internal editor doesn't get a chance to complain. Alright, so the 7-point plot outline, which is now on your screen, for genre short stories. I don't know why it would be different for genre than... I don't even know what a non-genre short story is. Just a fictional story? Fiction would be the genre. I don't know. I think all stories are genre. The beginning. So point 1 is character. And your character has to be someone the reader can experience the story through. He or she is a surrogate for the reader. When that character runs into problems or feels things or experiences things, you want the reader to experience those things as the character. Number 2, in the beginning, conflict/problem, the collision idea. The presenting problem in the story is not always the true conflict of the story, but it works best if it's related somehow. Now, if you've read books like The Hero's Journey, or The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, or The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, or screenplay, a lot of screenplay books, they all have a similar 3 or 4 act structure. They're actually all 3 act structure, but some of them take the middle act and divide it into 2 to make it 4 roughly even acts, although they aren't really even, so it's kind of a bit of a misnomer. But they all follow the same general idea. This is reducing that and distilling it in a way that it's better for short stories. But even in your novel, you're going to have this collision idea. And the collision idea is generally called the inciting event. It's the thing that happens to upset the normal world that the character lives in, which you're going to show at the very beginning. And you have a flawed character, preferably in a flawed world. And something happens to upset the status quo. Now, this character has been so ingrained into living this one lifestyle, he's hesitant, usually, to abandon what he does normally and go on and try to fix this new problem. So it's his decision to fix this new problem that generally takes you into Act 2 if you're writing a screenplay or even a novel. You don't have to worry so much about acts in a short story. You can pretty much use them to experiment and go to town. You can have things juggled around a lot more than you can and get away with in a novel. But the inciting event is not always the true conflict of the story, but it works best if it's related somehow. Let me give you an example. The Day After Tomorrow was a movie about the ice caps melting, and water levels rising, and everything getting very, very cold in the north. And the United States had to evacuate the southern provinces, the southern states. Sorry, I'm Canadian, thinking provinces. The southern states and all the ones in the upper states were already doomed. They couldn't do anything about them. As things started melting, New York gets flooded. But the actual problem with the story is that the president's son is up north, and he has to go get him and somehow survive this cold Arctic territory while getting him out of the problem area. So the inciting event was all of the water table rising and the coldness sweeping in, but the actual tension and the problem in the story becomes saving the president's son. But you can see how they're related. Okay, and the other thing in number 3, that in the beginning, where it says most newbie writers are very weak, is in setting. You want to do your setting up front. Do all your setting and all your exposition up front, or not all up front, but most of it up front, and then spoon feed it out as you go afterwards. And don't ever say more than you need to do. If there's a fact that the reader doesn't need, that you know about your character, don't throw it out on the paper just because you want to get it out on the paper. All right. Those 3, character, conflict, problem, setting, take us through. You could call them acts. I don't think in a short story you should, because I think in a short story you want to play around with things like acts. So the middle, which you'll see now on your screen, number 4, the character tries to solve the problem. Now when you say the character tries to solve the problem, this could be the repairing the inciting event, or it could be a problem like I just mentioned in The Day After Tomorrow that was spawned from the inciting event. Number 5, the character must fail, and not for stupid reasons. Your characters must act intelligently. Things must get worse when he fails. His first attempt at solving this should make things worse. The middle is going to be a series of trials and tests for your character. And every time he goes through a trial and a test, he's going to lose in the second act or in the middle. And through losing, he's going to gain knowledge, possibly magic items, possibly tricks he'll learn, possibly new ways to he'll know ways that he did wrong, so from then he might be able to generate ways of doing things right. Your character is going to be growing through all this. Your character is not going to come out of the middle the same character he did going into it, and that's very important. Number 5, I already told you, the character must fail. Things must get worse. And even better if the well-meaning actions of the character make it worse. So the character messes up. He thinks he's doing something right, but it's not helping, it's actually making things worse. This is the most common plot development that beginners miss. You have to have tension. The stakes have to rise. If you don't have tension and the stakes don't rise, your reader is going to get bored. If you want a movie that has a textbook case of how to handle tension, Argo, directed by Ben Affleck, believe it or not. I had my doubts, but it's an incredible textbook case of putting tension and release, although there's very little release in the movie, it just amps the tension over more and more and more and brings the stakes up higher and higher. It's an incredible lesson in how to create tension. Watch that movie if you haven't watched it. If you have, watch it again and take notes. And the end. The end is number 6 and 7. Number 6 is your climax. Now your climax is just like all of the other tests the character's gone through, but it's bigger. There's more on the line. The character tries to solve the problem again, and he either fails, in which case he might die. In that case, your story is a tragedy, or he succeeds, and your story is a comedy. Just those are the old Greek way of denoting a comedy versus a tragedy. Either outcome is valid. You can also have an ironic outcome. An ironic outcome is where the character got what he wanted, but realizes it really didn't do for him what he expected it to do when he got it. So getting what he wanted caused something else to go wrong, and he might actually give up what he's been fighting for through the whole story. And then the last point, the 7th point at the end, and the 7th point in the entire outline, is validation. You have to show that the story is over. In a novel, this is called the denouement. And you basically show the character back in the world, no longer flawed, or if he is flawed, he's flawed differently, and the world is no longer flawed, or if it is flawed, it's flawed differently. You got to see how the character's life has changed, and that's his character arc. You want him to become closer and closer to God. Now, next time I'm going to talk a little more about the climax, because there is some tricks to the climax that will really add power to your story. But for now, those are the 7 plot points. There is a little subsection here that says writers can violate these rules only if they're good writers and know what the rules are that they're breaking. Mainstream short stories will often have no beginning and no end, or they're implied. But these 7 points are almost mandatory with genre stories. So mainstream is, I guess, not genre. Mainstream to me is a genre. Anyway, maybe I'm just splitting hairs. That's the webinar for today. And again, it's a beginner's webinar, and I would like to hear some comments on it. What do you think? Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Michael out.